Ready? So I guess we're all reassured that according to the governor's dashboard, he reported, I think it was yesterday, this dashboard, that our region, the 7-county region we're in, which includes Jefferson, Lewis, St. Lawrence, Franklin, Hamilton, Essex, and Clinton County, all met the standards in the 7 different measures. Of course, the one we track very, very carefully right now is testing, and we'll keep you abreast of that. In my daily statement that I make, I do have a little data source that I keep on a regular basis for testing. As you know, I've been reporting that every day for the last couple of months. So you can take a look at that. That tells you exactly where we are on a day-to-day basis as well. The governor quite correctly says that he said today, check the data on a daily basis. You can track that data and know exactly where you are. Transparency is key. The elected officials are trying to inform the citizens so they can decide for themselves. If the numbers get ahead of us, we have to react immediately. And I think that's the message that we need to understand. In Plattsburgh, we've been incredibly good at being more proactive than just about any other community in the country and really getting ahead of this, and it's really paid off in netting us a very low infection rate in Clinton County. You've heard me say before that at one time we were in the top third of the worst counties for infection. Now we're in the bottom quarter, and I really appreciate all the work the county or the city residents in the county have done to make that happen. Now these regional control rooms are going to have to figure out protocols that are going to work for our region, and that's the next step. Should the numbers allow us to complete having green check boxes on the dashboard you can check every day, then businesses could be opening up as soon as later on this week, tomorrow or the next day, and that's really exciting. As you know, they're starting with construction, manufacturing, agricultural, etc. And then the next phase, should this go well for a couple of weeks, would be retail, financial, professional services, etc., as you've seen. The governor's now rolling out the various protocols for each of these phases. They've defined a lot of the protocols for phase 1. Just getting to the protocols for phase 2. I know a lot of questions are more on the phase 2 categories because that's where our small businesses are most affected. So we're going to need to really figure out how to do this well, with the primary concern, as the governor's articulated, is that public health has to come first. We recognize from a lot of economic studies now that the communities that do the best job with the public health, earliest and deepest, also succeed economically the best. By making the hard decisions, doing the hard work very early, and not reopening too soon. So I believe the governor has been offering an awful lot of leadership in this. In Clinton County itself, as of today, we have 83 cases. That's 18 new cases this month. That increase in the rate of cases could be because we're testing a lot more up here. You may have seen that we had a couple of cases on the campus that concerns me quite a bit because it's one of those highly concentrated populations, but we'll certainly monitor that. But I know the public health officials are really on that, and they've been helping to get more tests out. There's many, many more tests available in Clinton County now. Now it's not so much a resource issue as it was a couple of weeks ago, and now it's more of a management issue to use those resources as well as we possibly can. The state of New York has, outside of New York State, about 153,000 positives, and their current testing rate is 52.4 people per month per thousand of population. That's a little bit new way of reporting the data. The state is looking at the data on a monthly testing rate, and the threshold being 30 tests per month. So obviously upstate New York at 52.4 people per month per thousand of population well exceeds that 30-person threshold. Entire state has about 350,000 known positives now, and about 27,000 deaths, 157 more today, and none in this region for quite some time, which is really great. And of course, that nursing home population remains pretty vulnerable. The country, 101.43 million positives today, 84,000 deaths up to today. MIT, one of the entities that do this SIR prediction analysis, say that we'll probably have by late next week 100,000 perished in this country. And that's among 4.5 million cases in the entire world and about 300,000 deaths. U.S. has been leading the pack in that for quite some time. pretty soon, or not right now, or probably about right now, Russia's moving into second place, maybe this weekend, and Brazil's moving into third place next weekend probably as well. So things have shifted quite a bit. Russia and Brazil have been quite cavalier in their testing, quite cavalier and not clamping things down, and now they're showing the price for that behavior. So we know now what works. We see the countries that do best are the ones that really try to stay ahead of this and do all the various difficult things necessary. And Canada's faring quite well, Montreal being the very hot spot in Canada just to our north, and they're faring quite well as well because they're really taking the public health aspect very seriously. That's going to be key. It's going to be key to our reopening. Let's put health first, and if we can put health first, our economy will come along very nicely, I'm confident. As always, we have our finance committee chair here. He can answer any questions on the finances. Unless you have any additional questions for me, I'll go and check my database and make sure the numbers are just coming out now for testing are revised accordingly. You want to talk? I know you got a copy.
I do have a prepared statement today. I would also like to tell the press that we carefully analyzed the state of our budget for the remainder of the year, made predictions on where we're going to be, and today it looks like we have a $2.8 million deficit. So we've made some necessary furloughs and layoffs to try to address this, and it will help address it, but I fear that there may be other cuts before the end of the year. So I prepared a statement for you today concerning assessments. Last week we had a visit from the assessor's office, the county assessor's office, and legislator Chris Rosenquist, and they sort of hit us with another challenge. We've had all kinds of financial challenges this year so far. The newest challenge is many homes in the city were reassessed for a second time in 2 years in the last few weeks. I'm sure some of you are aware of that, and that's a big concern. You know, we already have many financial challenges to deliver a balanced budget and a very low tax rate for our citizens. We don't see that it's really moral to do anything else at this point. So I've prepared a statement for Mr. Rosenquist, and I'd like to read that to you. Last week we invited Chris Rosenquist, the county legislator in charge of the assessments and property tax office, to come to the council meeting and explain some questions about why assessments were increasing at a time when homeowners can least afford tax increases. Chris Rosenquist had no answers for our questions, so I would invite him once again to come and explain why the county can't halt reassessments during these economically challenging times. The property assessor who also attended stated that the south end, my ward in particular, was hit hard this year. I ask why once again, and I call on Mr. Rosenquist to call for a halt to reassessments this year, next year. Mark Dame, the former county legislator, represented half my ward, and there's no way Mr. Dame would have tolerated higher assessments and the tax increases that almost certainly will follow. I also call on Mr. Rosenquist to explain why the city, with its own services, pays almost the highest taxes in the county at $5.92 per thousand. I'm sorry, my glasses are fogging up, but I can't read without them. Okay, $5.92 per thousand of assessed value. The town of Peru, in comparison, pays $2.66 per thousand, less than half what city residents pay. It's almost as if the city residents are paying higher taxes so they can subsidize lower taxes elsewhere in the county. To me, it doesn't make sense. Maybe I don't understand all the parameters, but I'd love to have someone come explain it to us. The city, provides its own roads, its own snow removal, its own police and fire. There's little that we require from the county. And the things that we do use their services for, quite often, we're charged additional funds for them, such as assessments. We need Mr. Rosenquist and the other county legislators to help us with the challenges we face. We need help with the beach, the library, the Crate Center, the Recreation Center, and all of our regional events. Why do we have legislators in the city if they can't help us? Mr. Rosenquist, we call on you to answer these questions and explain what the county legislature can do for us in this hour of need. Thank you. Any questions?
Do you have a general level amount of the increase that the county assessor is putting on the city properties?
We will have an increase, an estimate in the tax levy. Now, last year, that increase was 4%. So last year, the city responded by lowering the city's taxes by 5%. So that we actually had a slight tax decrease last year. But the way assessments work, a person might have their house assessed, for a 7% higher, whereas the guy down the street might have his house assessed for 2% higher. So yes, lowering the taxes helps everybody, but what about the guy who had the 7% increase? He doesn't get any, as much help, I should say. So we look to the county to tell us what that increase is going to be, and it's the city's intent to lower the city's tax rate to account for that once again this year.
And we actually would challenge other municipalities to do the same, or other jurisdictions, because if everybody doesn't lower their tax rate by the same amount as the tax levy goes up, then we're still ending up paying more county taxes, more school district taxes, etc. So I think at this time, when people are really hurting, this is not a time to tax people more, I think is the general message.
And I don't know if it would be you or Mike that would answer this, but why is the county assessing city properties? Wouldn't the city assess its own properties?
The county does most of the assessment.
Oh, sorry.
The county does most of the assessment across the entire county. There are some municipalities that do their own assessment, but that tends to be very expensive. As you know, as the city's effort to contribute to shared services, we decided to join the consortium where the county would do that on our behalf.
Okay, and that's been going on for a while?
2 years now, that's right, yeah.
Okay.
And they do a very competent job. But there's one issue, what the assessments are. There's the other policy issue is, at times like these, is this maybe a good year to put in abeyance reassessments? I think that was done back in 2010 or so, during the real trouble that people were facing then. So this might be an opportunity to have a moratorium on not raising people's taxes across the board. Certainly the city's going to do the right thing. If the assessments rise, the city will lower its tax rate. But we have no control over what the county rate would be, the school district rate would be, etc. But we'd hope everybody would do likewise.
And is this a situation where they go through and they assess all the homes? Or is this where they go in and they assess some and then it's kind of an average amount that's put on all of the homes after they assess a few?
What I was told about this when I asked a similar question last week was that the county assessed mostly the west end last year, although last year many people in my ward, including myself, were reassessed. My assessment went up 7%. And my assessment went up this year again by about 7%. And lots of the people who live in my community, my ward, were also reassessed both last year and this year. So again, we're having a hard time understanding why that happens in our really most stressed neighborhoods. The interesting statistic for you, the average income in the city of Plattsburgh is $34,000 a year per household. So people just can't afford tax increases right now. We know many people in our community are unemployed, don't know when they're going back to work, and the last additional burden they need is a tax increase. One thing I would like to say about this is that the assessor's office is following the mandates of the county legislature. I do not fault the assessor's office for what they do. They do an excellent job and are very responsible, and I have nothing but good things to say about the assessor's office.
I have some other questions, but if these guys want to ask some right now, I'll defer to these guys. I guess it's me.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, Mayor and Mike, obviously, as we know yesterday, the North Country is going to be allowed to start reopening tomorrow. But it's for a lot of sectors that aren't strictly city business sectors. So how much will the phase one reopening actually help the city? And what are you looking forward to down the road? Kind of a two-part question there.
Sure, I think you're right. A lot of the city manufacturing has already been in the essential industry categories, medical products, transportation industry, paper products. People are buying more toilet paper than ever, apparently, during this era. And as a consequence, they've pretty much been in full operation. Some of the critical infrastructure construction projects have also been able to proceed. So you're right, in the city of Plattsburgh, I think what we're really more looking forward to is the opportunity to start opening up some of our small businesses, and that will be a little bit of time yet, probably, hopefully the beginning of June rather than the middle of May. So we're probably not going to see much of an effect locally quite yet, but that certainly gives us a lot of time to really plan for a good opening for our small businesses on June 1.
With knowing that we've got the opening starting to phase in, how is this going to affect your approach to the budget? Because you just mentioned the deficit, Mike, so.
That's a really good point. You know, sales tax just on the previous quarter, we expect to be down significantly. We understood just in the previous quarter, the sales tax was down double digits. But that's really only for 1 month or well less than 1 month of stay at home. Now we're looking into a period of 3 months, potentially, of low sales tax revenues. And this region kind of gets double whammied for sales tax because of all the Quebec or Canada traffic also that pay sales tax. And one of the big categories for us is gas tax. When they cross the border, they want to buy that cheap Canadian or American gasoline before they take their trip to Florida or wherever. So gas sales has been a really big part of our sales tax locally, although not necessarily across the entire state. So we're much more vulnerable to that than I believe most counties are. So we're expecting decreases in sales tax of 20 to 30%. That's really significant. It's our third largest revenue category, or about tied for our second largest category. Another one is AIM, the aid to and incentives to municipalities. We're already told to expect big cuts from Albany in any sort of discretionary spending that they're not absolutely obliged to do. And they wrote in the budget this year for the very first time that they're going to reflect on that AIM payment 3 times in the year. May 15th, so we'll find out that soon. June 15th or July 15th and January 15th, they're going to revise all those potentially downward. So I think NISAC was recently in the newspaper saying that we might need to be prepared for about a 50% reduction in AIM. So between these reductions, these were actually more dire than the initial budget estimates we made about a month ago when we started in on this path. And as you may recall, we had to do our budget and then evaluate which positions we needed to furlough, and then from a budget by budget line item position basis, then give it to the county civil service to then work with the unions to figure out who actually will be furloughed. We didn't in the budget document propose any individuals. We proposed where the departments felt that they could probably not have as much staffing and still do the various functions. The rest of that was really up to the union and the county to work out the details. But that was a very painful process, as you witnessed. And that was based on budget numbers that are actually quite a bit rosier than a month later, which is why this finance committee is now meeting on a weekly basis rather than a monthly basis, and discussing this at every council meeting, not just every fourth council meeting, because this is dynamic, very quickly changing, and typically changing for the worst. Unless, of course, we hear some great things out of Washington, but none of us are assuming that that's going to fill the hole. Absolutely, I don't see any scenario where what they would offer to localities is going to make up for the difference.
And I'd like to clarify too, Mike, you had mentioned when you were talking about the deficit that you're expecting, the $2.8 million deficit that you made necessary furloughs and layoffs.
Yes.
Was that part of the original furloughs that you guys were talking about weeks ago, or are these new ones?
The original. There have been no other furloughs or layoffs since that original group of, I think, roughly 30 employees.
Okay.
And there are many, many jobs that won't be filled, will remain open, and many other jobs where employees have chosen to retire. So altogether, that makes that 60 number you may have heard.
Yeah.
It's really 30 individuals who are affected right now.
Okay.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to say is we are often asked, why do you not spend down that $2.1 million fund balance that you've worked so hard to get over the last 2 to 3 years? And the answer is we need a small rainy day fund for day-to-day operations in case this situation with COVID-19 and the resulting economic challenges gets even worse. So we have to have a small fund balance. We as a council have discussed it, and we believe that it's important to keep 1.5 million of that 2.1 in our rainy day fund. But we are willing to sacrifice, $600,000, and we feel comfortable with that. Now, we had anticipated also a $688,000 fund balance, surplus to add to the fund balance. So we would have been, very close to $3 million by the end of this year. But we have decided that it's okay to sacrifice that $688,000 surplus we anticipated as well.
I've got a non-budget question.
Okay,
You
yeah.
guys want to go first?
Sure, just one question for the mayor. What will be key in this first phase in order for us to successfully get to phase 2, and when might that happen?
How do you mean, what might be key? What part?
Like, as we enter this first phase of reopening, what's going to be key so we can continue to go phase by phase here?
The 2-week phasing in of each of the phases gives time to see how it's working, see if more people are going to be infected, test for those additional individuals, and see if we've got a green light or a red light. So we're going to really be looking for safe social distancing. Each business has to produce a plan and post a plan of how they're going to maintain safe social distancing, their policies for wearing masks as we're doing here today, etc. Any testing procedures that they're going to be putting in place to make sure their plan succeeds. And it's pretty elaborate, and you can get that off the website, or if you send me an email, I'll send you a link to it. It's a pretty elaborate checklist that each one of them has to follow and tailor to their individual industry. And then we're going to see how that works. Like I say, a fair number of our industries have already been doing this because they've been the essential service industries already. So I'm pretty confident we as a city can put together that for the manufacturing construction end of it. The challenge will be, and we've got a couple of weeks now to formulate that, challenge will be how successfully we can extend that same model to retail. It means typically only having approximately 25 to 50% of the people in your store that you would normally have at a given time. I've seen some ideas, for instance, a lot of hair salons are interested in how they would cut people's hair and maintain safe social distancing. Well, it might be involving masks on both the hair stylist and the customer. Might be a face shield as well. It might be not people waiting in the waiting room, but instead waiting out in their car outside and then be called in, just like you do at the Well Now Center if you want to have your own test done. So these procedures, I think, are going to be more elaborate for the small businesses. Then the restaurants are now asking for outdoor seating permits. I think that's a great idea. Get some people outdoors, allows them to spread out. And it also overcomes the hurdle of, business, restaurant isn't really viable if they can only have 25% of the people sitting at their tables each on a given night. It's such a competitive business as it is. So to be able to spread out in the restaurant, but also spread outside perhaps might be another way to do it. So I think there's a lot of things we need to really put together over the next 2 to 4 weeks to make all those things happen. If I recall, restaurants will be in phase 3 opening. But professional services, financial services, which we have a lot of in the city, will be a phase 2 opening.
Thank you.
Now that safety plan, is that under state guidelines and has to be submitted to the state, or that goes to you?
No, it's wouldn't go to me. There's a regional control room that monitors all this, and the state only requires that those documents are prepared and kept on site for inspection. So I imagine the regional control rooms, they'll be putting out the guidelines they need. And then they may ask us or our code enforcement office to then go out and do the occasional inspection to make sure that the businesses are following those procedures.
Okay, well, if you guys are set, I'll go to my other question, because your pictures on the wall is reminding me I have to remember to ask you these questions. The Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition had a virtual press conference today. They are raising some concerns. There are concerns about the upcoming zoning and planning board meetings that are coming up starting, I think, next week. How concerned are you about those upcoming meetings?
Well, those two are both independent boards. I have no interaction with the boards in any way, so I'm sure they'll do all their various due diligence. And I didn't see the press conference myself, so I don't know the issues that they raised. I do understand, following the last zoning board meeting, that zoning board was asking for certain accommodations, and from what I understand, without knowing the details, that the various entities involved provided them with solutions as they requested. So I guess we'll see how it all goes. I think the first one, if I recall, is on Monday, and then a subsequent meeting of the planning board 1 week later. So we'll see how it goes.
They're trying to get a lot of people to call zoning board members and planning board members to express opposition to particularly the prime properties development, the one on the upper left-hand side. How critical, can you express for the listeners here, for our listeners, how critical is it for this development to move forward?
Well, I think the council might have something to add, but I think it's pretty obvious that in 2015 and 2016, when councils, I must have been about 5 or 6 councils before the current council put this idea forward, they felt that $10 million shot in the arm, and then the initial 30 million or so investment that follows that, because of the private sector matches an investment, would be transformational to this economy. I mean, if that doesn't happen, I think in this budget environment in Albany, I think it's pretty clear that that money is not going to be repurposed here. It's going to be repurposed to help pay for the $64 billion deficit that Albany expects over the next 4 years. So, I think this is really a question of whether we want that investment in the city or not. It's not at this point really a question of whether we like this project or not. It's whether we want the package or not. So we'll see how it goes. I think there's also a lot of people who want to see that shot in the arm, but there's also obviously a lot of people who have been very vocal all along about not having that happen.
You wanted
Yes, I do. If you ever have the opportunity to travel through New England and the northeastern states in general, you will observe a very interesting phenomenon in cities our size. Downtown development is where it's at. I can point to the village of Essex Junction in Vermont, all of the housing development there is taking place downtown. There, if you go to what they call the Five Corners in Essex Junction, Pat, you travel in that area a lot. You may have seen that. Beautiful, large housing facility there, very much like the one down here on Durkee Street that's being proposed. And the the village of Essex Junction didn't die when this came in. In fact, they see it as, like I do, as a springboard to growth, further growth. So cities that grow, and particularly that grow in their center city, seem to thrive. Cities that turn their back on their center city and try to live in the past do not survive. I've lived in the city of Plattsburgh for 25 years, and frankly, I've seen nothing but decline downtown. Yes, there will be a time or two when, you know, some stores or storefronts will fill up for a while, but generally speaking, there's no growth downtown. So what this project would do is kickstart growth downtown. There is an interesting map out in our lobby, if you walk halfway up the stairs, from 1897. In 1897, Plattsburgh City was an extremely densely populated place. There were numerous 4- and 5-story buildings all along Bridge Street, and all the way down to the waterfront. So really, I see the prime development as being the start of moving Plattsburgh into the next century, where it once again becomes dense, where you don't need a car to live here and work here and play here. Right now, the downtown Durkee Street is designed for people who live in the suburbs, not people who live in the city. You drive in your car, you know, from Saranac or Peru or Beekmantown or wherever, you got a convenient place to park. They even went so far as to one-way many of the streets in the city to make it more convenient for commuters to drive in. Well, that paradigm all over the country is dying. So if you want to live in the past, you know, keep the parking lot. If you want to live in the future, develop that valuable, beautiful piece of property. And everybody has to remember that the prime development is an example of a 3-way partnership. It's a partnership between the city of Plattsburgh, the citizens of Plattsburgh, and also prime development. Now, each of those 3 entities has to win in order to for it to happen. They have to win. We can't ask prime to come in and build a building that won't make them profit. We can't ask them to do that. That would be silly. And as far as the citizens, there have been numerous opportunities for citizens to chime in. We have a chart here somewhere that shows literally dozens of opportunities to.
Yeah, right over there, there are 100
Yeah.
meetings on time around.
Dozens of opportunities for the public to chime in. The PCC did not get what they wanted in those public sessions, so that is why today they're still hanging on and still trying to change up what the citizens told us they wanted a couple years ago. Okay? And I understand why they want to do that. Some of them work downtown. They enjoy that convenient commute in and easy parking. I would too if I worked downtown. But as I said, you know, the cities that survive are the cities that change. And we just need to become dense again, just like we were 100 years ago. It's what's happening all over. You know, take a drive all over Vermont, for example. St. Albans, that city is building downtown. All the construction's taking place downtown. It seems like they've abandoned their suburban fringe. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing because it means people can live downtown, work downtown, and play downtown. And there's no reason why the city of Plattsburgh can't expect the same thing.
By the way, the dashboard just revised just a moment ago. It again met the standard for today. That's great news. And as a matter of fact, we can see from this chart of Clinton County and the entire region, the testing continues to accelerate. That's what we need to do to keep that 7th category green lighting. If you want to see this is just the chart that I produce every day that you've been tracking perhaps yourself. Here's the one that the Canada state just put out just a moment ago. And still has the North Country 7 of 7. This is the category watching carefully. This total test per day across the county is 497 today. The threshold on a 7-day moving average has to be on average 419. It's been above 419 for a couple of days now. And to build on the councilor's point, I believe that small urban centers are looking more and more attractive all the time. We've heard of people who say they don't want to live in New York City or Montreal anymore. They might be more comfortable having urban amenities like ours, but in a little bit less congested environment where things like COVID-19 aren't such a big problem. So I really believe there is a future for small cities if we can manage it and be able to aspire. I firmly believe that City of Plattsburgh residents deserve good things, deserve good apartments, deserve good housing, and deserve quality of life. And I think we're cutting ourselves short if we refuse to be able to navigate that change successfully.
Yes, I'd like to add that many of the PCC members, and perhaps the more vocal ones, are landlords, and they're afraid that adding more housing downtown will increase competition for their space, and they might not be able to rent their apartments. But actually, studies show that when you have market rate apartments come in downtown, it lifts the quality of housing for everybody. So the landlords then would be challenged to improve their apartments and make them nicer for people, and they wouldn't have a problem renting them. In fact, they might be able to charge more rent. I would hope so.